Hi, don't get. How you doing? Okay?
I'm doing fine.
That's
You're
great.
looking real good.
Yeah?
Real good.
All right.
Yeah. Big movie coming out, huh?
Oh, everything is going good. Everything is okay, yeah.
Bought a house, I hear?
I bought a house.
Out here?
In Connecticut, I bought a house. Westport.
Westport.
Oh, yeah, nice place, yeah.
That's very high class.
Almost from Connecticut.
Yeah.
Yeah, a nice place up there, Westport. Bought a house up there, Johnny, and it's really nice. Howard's nice. People are nice, you know what I mean? And I got nice neighbors over there, too. And last week I played tennis with my neighbors, Marianne and Biff.
Marianne and Biff.
You ought to come up there, you know me?
Yeah.
Spend a few days, you and I relax. They don't bother you. It's nice. Have a good time. Just you and I alone.
Sure.
Want to bring that along, too?
Sure.
No, but I've been working hard, Johnny, and I'm trying to relax. I go to Las Vegas next week. The resorts here for that. I got an album coming out, a movie coming out. I'm working very hard.
Yeah.
Well, my father, he was a workaholic.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You mentioned work, he got drunk.
I didn't know.
Well, I finally solved my drinking problem. I joined Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah, I still drink. I use a different name. That's all.
Hi, I'm Ron. I'm tired of watching the good guys lose all the time. When you're right and you're losing the argument, you know that something is wrong. So I'm finding out what is wrong and righting it. I'm biased, not neutral. I'm biased in favor of what is right and biased against what is wrong. I'm one of the good guys, a true conservative. The bad guys, however you care to define them, socialist, lefty, communist, liberal, rhino, are the ones that promote the wrong. The people that promote insanity, stupidity, immorality, and ugliness. That is what cultural and political arguments come down to. Right and wrong, good and bad, beautiful and ugly. Back in a minute. Good morning. It's Saturday, Mickey-Spillane Saturday, July the 29th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have No Free Lunch, The Rape of the Mind, Donald Trump, Sean Parnell, and I, the Jury, Chapter 11. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, His grace uncrown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for heroes prove in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America,
Thank you. And now there's no free lunch. 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
Nothing is more usual among states which have made some advances in commerce than to look on the progress of their neighbors with a suspicious eye, to consider all trading states as their rivals, and to suppose that it is impossible for any of them to flourish, but at their expense. In opposition to this narrow and malignant opinion, I will venture to assert that the increase of riches and commerce in any one nation, instead of hurting, commonly promotes the riches and commerce of all its neighbors, and that a state can scarcely carry its trade and industry very far where all the surrounding states are buried in ignorance, sloth, and barbarism. David Hume. It is not rich countries that hurt poor countries, but poor countries that hurt rich countries, according to the great Enlightenment philosopher. His reasoning: the economic treasure of a flourishing country inevitably spills over into neighboring countries, whereas the shortcomings of a country limits the trade and capacity of its neighboring countries. Indeed, this has been evident throughout modern history that prosperous countries are a benefit to their continental neighbors, and weak ones are an albatross to theirs.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. So who is the true conservative? He is the person that has the courage of his convictions and is confident in what he knows. He is the person that understands that culture trumps politics. He's not selfish, but minds his own business. He does not go looking for trouble. He is alert. He curbs his curiosity, and he acts like an adult. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He is judgmental and moralizes. He refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why, rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American, and he is better than the socialist. He's a better friend, father, brother, family member, and a better person, period. You have to know that being a true conservative is best, or you are wasting your time. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
A survey of psychological processes involved in brainwashing and menticide. At the end of this chapter, describing the various influences that lead to yielding and surrender to the enemy's strategy, it is useful to give a short survey of the psychological processes involved. Phase 1. Artificial breakdown and deconditioning. The inquisitor tries to weaken the ego of his prisoner. Though originally physical torture was used, hunger and cold are still very effective. Physical torture may often increase a person's stubbornness. Torture is intended to a much greater extent to act as a threat to the bystanders, the people's imagination. Their wild anticipation of torture leads more easily to their breakdown when the enemy has need of their weakness. Of course, occasionally a sadistic enemy may find individual pleasure in torture. The many devices the enemy makes use of include intimidating suggestion, dramatic persuasion, mass suggestion, humiliation, embarrassment, loneliness and isolation, continued interrogation, overburdening the unsteady mind, arousing more and more self-pity. Patience and time help the inquisitor to soften a stubborn soul. Just as in many old religions, the victims were humbled and humiliated in order to prepare for the new religion. So, in this case, they are prepared to accept the totalitarian ideology. In this phase, out of mere intellectual opportunism, the victim may consciously give in. Phase 2. Submission to and positive identification with the enemy. As has already been mentioned, the moment of surrender may often arrive suddenly. It is as if the stubborn negative suggestibility changed critically into surrender and affirmation. What the inquisitor calls the sudden inner illumination and conversion is a total reversal of inner strategy in the victim. From this time on, in psychoanalytic terms, a parasitic superego lives in man's conscience, and he will speak his new master's voice. In my experience, such sudden surrender often occurred together with hysterical outbursts into crying and laughing, like a baby surrendering after obstinate temper tantrums. The inquisitor can attain this phase more easily by assuming a paternal attitude. As a matter of fact, many a POW is courted by a form of paternal kindness, gifts, sweets at birthdays, and the promise of more cheerful things to come. Maloney compares this sudden yielding with the theophany or kenosis, internal conversion, as described by some theological rites. For our understanding, it is important to stress that yielding is an unconscious and purely emotional process, no longer under the conscious intellectual control of the brainwashee. We may also call this phase the phase of auto-hypnosis. Phase 3, the reconditioning to the new order. Through both continual training and taming, the new phonograph record has to be grooved. We may compare this process with an active hypnosis into conversion. Incidental relapses to the old form of thinking have to be corrected as in Phase 1. The victim is daily helped to rationalize and justify his new ideology. The inquisitor delivers to him the new arguments and reasonings. This systematic indoctrination of those who long avoided intensive indoctrination constitutes the actual political aspect of brainwashing and symbolizes the ideological Cold War going on at this very moment. Phase 4, liberation from the totalitarian spell. As soon as the brainwashee returns to free democratic atmosphere, the hypnotic spell is broken. Temporary nervous repercussions take place, like crying spells, feelings of guilt, and depression. The expectation of a hostile homeland, in view of his having yielded to enemy indoctrination, may fortify this reaction. The period of brainwashing becomes a nightmare. Only those who were staunch communists before may stick to it. But here, too, I have seen the enemy impose its mental pressure too well and convert their former comrades into eternal haters of the regime.
And that was The Rape of the Mind by Joost-Meerlo, M.D. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, a little bit of Donald Trump.
Well, thank you very much, Erie. We love Erie. We've been winning Erie right from the beginning. You know, Erie used to be a Democrat stronghold until we came along. It's no longer. Now we're approaching the most important battle of our lives. With your help, we are going to win the Pennsylvania primary very easily, actually. And we're going to evict crooked Joe Biden from the White House. We're going to take back our country, and we're going to make America great again. The Bidens got millions of dollars from Ukraine. Now Ukraine gets billions and billions of dollars from the American taxpayer. Joe Biden is compromised. He's dragging us into a global conflict on behalf of the very same country, Ukraine, that apparently paid his family all of these millions of dollars. In light of this information, the U.S. Congress should refuse to authorize a single additional payment of our depleted stockpiles. Did you see last week? Well, thank you very much, Erie. We love Erie. We've been winning Erie right from the beginning. You know, Erie used to be a Democrat stronghold until we came along. It's no longer. It's a Republican. It's a Trump stronghold. We love Erie. We love you people, hardworking people. I'm thrilled to be back in the beautiful Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with thousands of proud, hardworking American patriots. For 7 years, you and I have been fighting side by side to to rescue our nation from the sinister forces who truly hate it and want to destroy it. And some of those are from within. We do know that. We do know that. Now we're approaching the most important battle of our lives. With your help, we are going to win the Pennsylvania primary very easily, actually. And we're going to evict crooked Joe Biden from the White House. We're going to take back our country, and we're going to make America great again. When this battle is over, I'll be back in the White House, and the Bidens will have to justify all of the corruption that they've done. They're going to have to do it. They're doing everything they can to ruin this election, just like they ruined the last. And look at what happened to our country. Look at what happened to our country. When this...
Thank you. And now Sean Parnell at the same Erie rally.
Well, if Donald J. Trump has shown us anything, ladies and gentlemen, it's that one man refusing to back down is contagious.
So that was several clips of Donald Trump and one of Sean Parnell at the rally in Erie, Pennsylvania. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, I, the Jury by Mickey-Spillane.
Chapter 11. The next second, there was a furious pounding on the door and voices raising Cain outside. "Get away from that door and shut up," I yelled. "Who's in there?" a voice demanded. "Your Uncle Charlie," I shot back. "Now can that chatter and get the dean up here fast as you can and tell him to call the police." "Watch the window, fellas," the voice hollered. "The door is still sealed, and he must have gone in that way. That's it, Duke. Take the rifle. No telling who he is." These crazy college kids. If one of them got jumpy with that rifle, I'd be a dead duck. I stuck my head out the window as four of them came tearing around the corner at top speed. When they saw me, they stopped in a flurry of dust. I waved to the big tow-headed kid carrying a .22 repeater. "Come here, you." He marched up to the window with the gun out in front of him like he was going to bayonet somebody. He was scared stiff. I palmed my tin and shoved it under his nose. "See this badge?" I said. "I'm a cop, New York. Now keep your noses out of here. If you want to do something, post a guard around the campus until the cops get here. And don't let anyone out. Understand?" The kid bobbed his head eagerly. He was glad to get away from there. The next second, he was shouting orders all over the place. Good ROTC material. The dean came running up, blowing like a sick horse. "What happened?" His voice nearly broke when he spoke. "I just shot a guy. Call the cops and be sure the kids stay out of here." He took off like a herd of turtles, and I was left alone, save for the curious voices outside the door. What I had to do had to be done before a lot of Hayseed County cops took over. I let George lay where he had fallen, taking time only to notice the gun. It was a .45, same as mine, and the one he had in his room when I searched it. I recognized a scratch on the butt. The green box was my next step. I sifted the ashes carefully, trying to determine what they had been. The blackened cover of a notepad lay on the bottom, but it dissolved into dust at my touch. These ashes had been one or more books. I would have given $1 million to know what they had had in them. Not a word was visible, so thoroughly had George burned them. I looked around the spot on the floor where the box was originally. A few ashes were there, too. One was larger than the rest and not as well burned through. It had a string of numbers on it. I wondered how he concealed the fire. From outside, it would have lit the room up as much as the overhead light would have. I found out in a moment. A throw rug lay on the floor. When I turned it over, the underside was blackened. Stuck to the mesh of the weave was a half-page leaf of the paper. It would have gone well at a murder trial. George was named as the trigger man in a murder, and where the proof could be found was also revealed, in a safe deposit box in an uptown bank. It even gave the number and the code word. The key was in trust with the bank officer. So, George was a murderer. I'd always thought he went that far back in the old days. Well, here was something to prove it. At least it more than justified my self-defense act in gunning him down. I tucked the charred bit into a small envelope I carry for things like this, addressed it to myself, and put a stamp on it. This time, I used the door. I broke the seal with my shoulder and nearly bowled over a half-dozen kids. When I shooed them away, I looked around for a postbox and found one at the end of the corridor. I dropped it in and went back to wait for the arrival of the cops. It was coming out now. Heretofore, I thought Kalecki was the big wheel behind the syndicate, but now I could see that he was only a small part of it. Hal Kynes had been the big shot. His methods were as subtle as those he used in obtaining his women. He went to enough trouble, but it was worth it. First, he picked on guys with a dubious past, and ones against whom he wouldn't run into much trouble obtaining evidence. When he compiled it, he presented the stuff, or a photostat, and made the guy work with him. If I could have gotten the information that was burned, we could have broken the filthiest racket in the world. I'm too late now, but at least I had a start. Maybe there were duplicates in the strongbox, but I doubted that. Hal probably kept his evidence in different boxes for different people. That way, if he had to put the pressure on the group, he could send a note to the cops to investigate such and such a box without having any of his others disturbed. Nice thinking. Very far-sighted. I felt sort of good over having nailed Kalecki, but he still wasn't the one I wanted. If this kept up, there wouldn't be anyone left at all. There was an outsider in this case. There had to be. One that nobody knew about, except, perhaps, those that were dead. The county police arrived with all the pomp and ceremony of a presidential inaugural address. The chief, a big florid-faced farmer, pranced into the room with his hand on the butt of a revolver and promptly placed me under arrest for murder. 2 minutes later, after a demonstration of arm-waving, shouting, and bulldozing, of which I did not think myself capable, he retreated hastily and just as promptly unarrested me. However, to soothe his ruffled feelings, I let him inspect my private operator's license, my gun permit, and a few other items of identification. I let him listen to me put in the call to Pat. These county cops have no respect for authority outside their own limits. But when he got on the phone, Pat threatened him with calling the governor unless he cooperated with me. I gave him what details were necessary to keep him busy a while, then took off for New York. Going back, I took it easier. It was early morning when I stopped outside of Pat's office, and my eyes wouldn't stay open. He was waiting for me, nevertheless. As quickly as I could, I gave him the details of the shooting. He dispatched a car upstate to get photographs and see if there was anything to be learned from the ashes of the burned notebooks. I didn't feel like going home, so I called Charlotte. She was up and dressed for an early appointment. "Can you stay put until I get there?" I queried. "Certainly, Mike. Hurry up. I want to hear what happened." "Be there in 15 minutes, I said, then hung up. It took 30. Traffic was pretty heavy. Charlotte was in the door while Kathy was dusting. She took my coat and hat, and I headed for the sofa. I relaxed with a sigh, and she bent down and kissed me. I hardly had enough energy to kiss her back. With her there beside me, I told the whole story. Charlotte was a good listener, and when I finished, she stroked my forehead and my face. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked. "Yeah, tell me what makes a nymphomaniac." "So, you've been to see her again?" Her answer was indignant. "Business, darling." I wondered when I'd be able to stop using that line. Charlotte laughed. "That's all right. I understand. As for your question, a nymphomaniac can be either a case of gradual development through environment or born into a person. Some people are oversexed, a glandular difficulty. Others can be repressed in childhood, and when they find themselves in an adult world, no longer the victim of senseless restrictions, they go hog wild. Why? I evaded the why and asked, "Can the ones with emotional difficulty go bad?" "You mean, will they kill as a result of their emotional overload?" I'd say offhand, no. They find an easier out for their emotions. "For instance," I parried. "Well, if a nymphomaniac showers a great deal of emotion on a person, then is rebuffed, instead of killing the one who spurned her, she simply finds another with whom to become emotionally entangled. It's quicker, besides being more effective. If she suffers a loss of prowess from the rebuff, this new person renews her. See? I got what she was driving at, but there was still something else. Would it be likely for both the twins to be nymphomaniacs? Charlotte gave me that delightful laugh. Possible, but it doesn't happen to be so. You see, I know them rather well. Well, not too well, but enough to determine their characters. Mary is beyond help. She likes to be the way she is. I dare say she has more fun than her sister, but Esther has seen so many of her escapades and helped her out of trouble that she has a tendency to turn away from love affairs herself. Esther is a charming enough person, all right. Just about everything her sister has, without the craze for men. When a man does drop into Esther's life, she'll take it naturally. I'll have to meet her, I said sleepily. By the way, are you going up to their place this weekend? Why, yes. Mary invited me. I'll be late getting there, but I won't miss the game. However, I have to come back right after it. Are you going? Uh-huh. I'm going to drive Myrna up. That is, I still have to call her so she'll know about it. Swell, she said. That was the last word I heard. I fell into a sleep as deep as the ocean. When I awoke, I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 4 p.m. Kathy heard me stir and came into the room with a tray of bacon and eggs and coffee. Here's your breakfast, Mr. Hammer. Miss Charlotte tell me to take good care of y'all till she come home. Kathy gave me a toothy white smile and waddled out after setting the tray down. I gulped the eggs hungrily and polished off 3 cups of coffee. Then I called Myrna, and she told me that it was okay to pick her up at 10 a.m. Saturday. I hung up and poked around the bookshelves for something to read while I waited. Most of the fiction I had read, so I passed on to some of Charlotte's textbooks. One was a honey called Hypnosis as a Treatment for Mental Disorders. I skimmed through it. Too wordy. It gave the procedure for putting a patient into a state of relaxation, inducing hypnosis, and suggesting treatment. That way, the patient later went about effecting his own cure automatically. And that would have been a nice stunt for me to learn if I could do it. I pictured myself putting the eye on a beautiful doll and, oh, hell, that was nasty. Besides, I wasn't that bad off. I chose one that had a lot of pictures. This one was titled Psychology of Marriage. Brother, it was a dilly. If it weren't for the big words, I would have enjoyed it. I wished they would write stuff like that in language for the layman. Charlotte came in when I was on the last chapter. She took the book out of my hand and saw what I was reading. Thinking of anything special? She asked. I gave her a silly grin. Better get the lowdown now while I'm able to. Can't say how long I'm going to have the strength to hold off. She kissed me and whipped me up a scotch and soda. When I downed it, I told Kathy to get my hat and coat. Charlotte looked disappointed. Have to leave so soon? I thought you'd stay to dinner at least. Not tonight, honey. I have a job for my tailor, and I want to get cleaned up. I don't suppose you'd have a razor handy. I pointed to the bullet hole in my coat. Charlotte got a little white when she saw how close it had come. Are you hurt, Mike? Hell no. Got a bullet burn across the ribs, but it never broke the skin. I pulled up my shirt to confirm it, then got dressed. The phone rang just then, and she took it. She frowned once or twice, said, Are you sure? All right, I'll look into it. And when she hung up, I asked her what the matter was. A client responded to treatment, then lapsed into his former state. I think I'll prescribe a sedative and see him in the morning. She went to her desk. I'll run along then. Maybe I'll see you later. Right now, I want to get a haircut before I do anything else. Okay, darling. She came over and put her arms around me. There's a place on the corner. That'll do as well as any, I told her between kisses. Hurry back, Mike. You bet, darling. Luckily, the place was empty. A guy was just getting out of the chair when I went in. I hung my coat on a hook and plunked into the seat. Trim, I told the barber. After he ogled my rod a bit, he draped me with the sheet and the clippers buzzed. 15 minutes later, he dusted me off, and I walked out of there slicked down like an uptown Sharpie. I got the boiler rolling and turned across town to get on Broadway. I heard the sirens wailing, but I didn't know it was Pat until a squad car shot past me, and I saw him leaning out of the side window. He was too busy to notice me, but cut across the intersection while a cop on the corner held traffic back. Further down the avenue, another siren was blasting a path northward. It was more a hunch than anything else, the same kind of a hunch that put me on the trail of George Galecki, and this one paid off too, but in a way I didn't recognize at first. As soon as the cop on the corner waved us on, I followed the howl of police cars and turned left on Lexington Avenue. Up ahead, I saw the white top of Pat's car weaving in and out of the lanes. It slowed down momentarily and turned into a side street. This time, I had to park a block away. 2 police cars had the street barred to traffic at either end. I flashed my badge and my card to the patrolman on the corner. He let me pass, and I hurried down to the little knot of people gathered outside a drugstore. Pat was there with what looked like the whole homicide bureau. I pushed my way through the crowd and nodded to Pat. I followed his eyes down to the crumpled figure on the sidewalk. Blood had spilled out of the single hole in the back, staining the shabby coat a deep maroon. Pat told me to go ahead, and I turned the face around to see who it was. I whistled. Bobo Hopper would keep bees no longer. Pat indicated the body. Know him? I nodded. Yeah, know him well. His name is Hopper. Bobo Hopper. A hell of a nice guy, even if he was a moron. Never heard anything in his life. He used to be one of Galecki's runners. He was shot with a .45, Mike. What? I exploded. There's something else now. Dope. Come over here. Pat took me inside the drugstore. The fat little clerk was facing a battery of detectives, led by a heavy-set guy in a blue serge suit. I knew him all too well. He never liked me much, since I blew a case wide open under his very nose. He was Inspector Daly of the Narcotics Squad. Daly turned to me. What are you doing here? He demanded. Same thing you are, I think. Well, you can start walking as of now. I don't want any private noses snooping around. Go on, beat it. One moment, Inspector. When Pat talked in that tone of voice, he could command attention. Daly respected Pat. They were different kinds of cop. Daly had come up the hard way, with more time between promotions, while Pat had achieved his position through the scientific approach to crime. Even though they didn't see eye to eye in their methods, Daly was man enough to give Pat credit where credit was due, and listen to him. Mike has an unusual interest in this case, he continued. It was through him we got as far as we have. If you don't mind, I would like him to keep in close touch with this. Daly glared at me and shrugged his beefy shoulders. Yeah, okay. Let him stay. Only be sure you don't withhold any evidence, he spat at me. The last time I was involved in a case he was working on, I had to play my cards close to my vest. But hanging on to the evidence I had led me to a big-time drug dealer we never would have nailed otherwise. Daly never forgot that. The head of the Narcotics Bureau was blasting away at the druggist, and I picked up every word. Once more now. Give me the whole thing and see what else you can remember. Harried to the breaking point, the druggist wrung his pudgy hands and looked at the sea of faces glaring at him. Pat must have had the most sympathetic expression, so he spoke to him. I was doing nothing. Sweeping out under the counter, maybe. That is all. This man, he walks in and says, fill a prescription. Very worried he was. He hands me a broken box that has nothing written on the cover. He says to me, he will lose his job and nobody will trust him if I can't do it. He drops the box he was delivering and somebody steps on it and his prescription is all over the sidewalk. This powder was coming out of the sides. I take it in the back and taste it yet. Then test it. Pretty sure I was that I knew what was in it. And when I tested, I was positive. Heroin. This should not be. So like a good citizen, I phone the police and tell them what I have. They tell me to keep him here, but how do I know that he is not a gangster and will shoot me? Here the little guy stopped and shuddered. I have a family yet. I take my time, but he tells me to hurry up and puts his hand in a pocket. Maybe he has a gun. What can I do? I fill another box with boric acid, charge him $1, and he walks out. I leave my counter to go see where he goes, but before I get to the door, he falls to the sidewalk. He is shot, all the way dead. I call police again, then you come. See anyone running off? Pat asked. He shook his head. Nobody. At this time it is slow. Nobody on the street. Did you hear a shot? No, that I could not understand. I was too scared. I see the blood from the hole, and I run back inside. Pat stroked his chin. How about a car? Did any go by at that time? The little guy squinted his eyes and thought back. Once he started to speak, stopped, then reassured, said, Yes, now that you remind me. I think one goes by just before. Yes, I am sure of it. Very slow it goes, and it was turning. He continued hurriedly from here. Like it was coming from the curb, maybe. It goes past. Then, when I am outside, it is gone. I don't even look for it after that. So scared I am. Daly had one of his men taking the whole thing down in shorthand. Pat and I had heard enough. We went outside to the body and checked the bullet angle. From the position of where it lay, the killer had been going toward Lexington when the shot was fired. The packet of boric acid, now a blood red, lay underneath Bobo's hand. We patted the pockets. Empty. His wallet held $8 and a library card. Inside the coat was a booklet on the raising of bees. Silencer, Pat said. I'll give 10 to 1 it's the same gun. I wouldn't take that bet, I agreed. Oh, what do you make of it, Mike? I don't know. If Kalecki were alive, it would involve him even deeper. First prostitution, now dope. That is, if Bobo was still working for Kalecki. He said not, and I believed him. I thought Bobo was too simple to try to deceive anybody. I'm not so sure now. We both stared at the body a bit, then walked down the street away by ourselves. I happened to think of something. Pat. Uh-huh. Remember when Kalecki was shot at in his home, when he tried to put the finger on me? Oh, yeah. Oh, what of it? It was the killer's gun. The killer we want fired that shot. Why? Can you make anything out of it? Even then, Kalecki was on the spot for something, and he moved to town for his own protection. That's what we want. The answer to the question of why he was shot at. Oh, that's going to take some doing, Mike. The only ones that can tell us are dead. I gave him a grin. No, there's still someone. The killer. He knows why. Have you anything to do right now? Oh, nothing I can't put off. This case will be in Daly's hands for a while. Why? I took his arm and walked him around the block to my car. We got in and headed toward my apartment. The mailman was just coming out when we got there. I opened my box and drew out the envelope I addressed to myself at the college and ripped it open. I explained to Pat I had to get the piece of charred evidence out of the hands of those hick cops while I could, and he agreed that I did it right. Pat knew the ropes. He put in 3 phone calls, and when we reached the bank, a guard ushered us into the office of the president. By that time, he had already received the court order by phone to permit us to inspect the box listed on the slip. It was there, all of it. Evidence enough to hang George Kalecki 12 times over. I was really grateful now that I'd put a slug into him. The guy was a rat, all right. He had his fingers in more than I had suspected. There were photostats of checks, letters, a few original documents, and plenty of material to indict George Kalecki for every vice charge there was, including a few new ones. But nothing else. Where George had gone, there was no need for a court. Hal Kynes had tied him up in a knot with both ends leading to the hot squat if he had tried to make a break. Pat ran over the stuff twice, then scooped them all into a large envelope, signed for it, and left. Outside, I asked, "What are you going to do with the junk?" "Go over it carefully. Maybe I can trace these checks even though they are made out to cash and don't show the signature on the reverse side. How about you?" "I might as well go home like I planned. Why, got something else?" Pat laughed. "We'll see. I had the idea you might be holding out on me, so I wasn't going to tell you this, but since you're still playing it square, I'll let you in on something." He took a pad from his pocket and flipped it open. "Here's some names. See if you know anything about them." Pat cleared his throat. "Henry Strebhouse, Carmen Silby, Thelma B. Duval, Virginia R. Reams, Conrad Stevens." Pat stopped and waited, looking at me expectantly. "Strebhouse and Stevens spent a stretch in the big house," I said. "I don't know the others. Think I saw the Duval girl's name in the society columns once." "Well, you did. Well, you're not much help, so I'll tell you. Each one of these people is in city or private sanitariums. Dope fiends. Oh, that's nice, I mused. How did it get out? A Vice Squad reported it. Yeah, I know they've been on something like that, but it's funny it didn't reach the papers. Oh, I get it. They haven't found the source yet, huh? What is it? Pat gave me a wry grin. Oh, that's what Daly would like to know. None of them will reveal it, not even under threat of imprisonment. Unfortunately for us, some of them have connections too high up for us to try to extract information the hard way. We did get this, though. The stuff was delivered to them via a half-witted little guy who didn't know from nothing. I let my breath go out hard. Bobo. Exactly. They'll be able to identify him, if they will. Maybe his death will make them clam up even tighter. Damn, I said softly. And while they're under treatment, we can't push them. Our hands are tied very neatly. There's a tie-up, Pat. There has to be. Look how closely all this is connected. At first glance, it seems to be loose as hell, but it's not. Bobo and Kolecki. Hal and Kolecki. Hal and Eileen. Eileen and Jack. Either we've run into an outfit that had a lot of irons in the fire, or else it was a chain reaction. Jack started it going, and the killer knocked him off. But the killer had to cover up something else. From then on, it was a vicious circle. Brother, have we run into something? Oh, you're not kidding, and we're standing right in the bottom of the well. Now what? It beats me, Pat. I see a little light now. A few things are falling into place. What? I'd rather not say. Just little things. They don't point in any direction, except to tell me that the killer has a damn good motive for all this. Still racing me, Mike? You can bet your pretty white tail on that. I think we're in the home stretch, but the track is muddy now and bogging us down. We'll have to plod through it to firmer ground before we can start whipping it up. I grinned at him. You won't beat me out, Pat. What do you bet? A steak dinner. Taken. I left him then. He grabbed a cab back to the office, and I went up to my apartment. When I took off my pants, I felt for my wallet. It was gone. That was nice. It had 200 berries in my billfold, and I couldn't afford to lose it. I put my pants back on and went down to the car. Not there either. I thought. I might have dropped it in the barber shop, but I paid that bill with change I had in my side pocket. Damn. I climbed back in the car and turned it over, then headed south to Charlotte's apartment. The lobby door was open, and I walked up. I rang the bell twice, but no one answered. Someone was inside, though, and I could hear a voice singing Swanee River. I pounded on the door, and Kathy opened it up. What's the matter? I asked her. Doesn't the bell ring anymore? Sure enough, Mr. Hammer. I think so. Come in. Come in. When I walked in the door, Charlotte came running out to meet me. She had on a stained smock and a pair of rubber gloves. Hey, honey, she smiled at me. You sure made that trip fast. Goody, goody, goody. She threw her arms around me and tilted her head for a kiss. Kathy stood there watching, her teeth flashing whitely in her mouth. Go away, I grinned. Kathy turned her back so I could kiss her boss. Charlotte sighed and laid her head against my chest. Going to stay now? Nope. Oh, why? You just got here. I came to get my wallet. I walked over to the sofa with her and ran my hand down behind the cushions. I found it. The darn thing had slipped out of my hip pocket while I was asleep and stuck there. Now I suppose you're going to accuse me of stealing all your money, Charlotte pouted. Idiot. I kissed the top of her blonde head. What are you doing in this outfit? I fingered the smock. I'm developing pictures. Want to see them? She led me to her darkroom and turned out the lights. As she did so, a red glow came from the shield over the sink. Charlotte put some films in the developer, and in a few moments printed up a pic of a guy sitting in a chair, hands glued to the metal arms, and a strained expression on his face. She flicked the overhead on and looked over the photo. Who's this? A clinical patient. As a matter of fact, that is one that Hal Kynes had released from the charity ward of the city hospital to undergo treatment in our clinic. What's the matter with him? The guy looks scared to death. He's in a state of what is commonly known as hypnosis. Actually, there's nothing more to it than inducing in the patient a sense of relaxation and confidence. In this case, the patient was a confirmed kleptomaniac. It wasn't found out until he was admitted to the city ward after being found nearly dead of starvation on the streets. When we got to the bottom of his mental status, we found that in childhood he had been deprived of everything and had to steal to get what he wanted. Through a friend, I got him a job and explained why he had been like that. Once understanding his condition, he was able to overcome it. Now, he's doing quite well. I put the pick back in a rack and looked the place over. She had certainly spent enough fixing up the darkroom. I saw where I was going to have to earn more than I did to support a wife who had such a lavish hobby. Charlotte must have read my mind. After we're married, she smiled, I'll give all this up and have my pictures developed at the corner drugstore. Nah, we'll do all right. She grabbed me and hung on. I kissed her so hard I hurt my mouth this time. It was a wonder she could breathe. I held her so tightly. We walked to the door, arm in arm. What about tonight, Mike? Where will we go? I don't know. To the movies, maybe. Swell. I'd like that. I opened the door. When I did, I pointed to the chime behind it. How come it doesn't ring anymore? Oh, phooey. Charlotte poked under the rug with her toe. Kathy has been using the vacuum in here again. She always knocks out the plug. I bent down and stuck it back in the socket. See you about 8, kitten, I said as I left. She waited until I was nearly out of sight down the stairs, then blew me a kiss and shut the door.
And that was Chapter 11 of I, the Jury by Mickey-Spillane. Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. And until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.